This series is the story of the new amphibious Arctic vehicle project named Bernard. Building on ideas, skills and questions raised during the Allen lifeboat conversion, as a team we will share all those moments needed to get Bernard up north, onto the ice and making himself useful. You saw us laminate some carbon fibre and then vacuum bag it in part 1. Part 1 will now in scandalous news be followed by this, part 2. Here's a closer look for you in case you've never seen a vacuum bag pull down over a wet lay lamination before, and you'll hear on my channel as you want to familiarise yourself before perhaps starting your own composites money pit. Sorry, composites adventure. Alas, it was not a full aggressive pull down onto the part. There was a leak somewhere. And with that vacuum pump, hardly loud though it was, listening for obvious leaks is tricky, but before getting serious and fetching the stethoscope, we decided a general circuit of the bag with ears down against the bag might find the source. I went for the obvious culprits, but no sudden tightening of the bag. It's pretty normal to run at least one vacuum until the cure's done. We'll pull down with both vacuums, and then the one that's forgiving, there's one that is oilless and so it can run dry. And I may just have that one running through the evening. I suppose that was a premonition that we might not fully solve the leak. Not my usual melding of realism with optimism. Meanwhile, we all set to investigating the gussets, the next most likely issue. 1 or 2 re-gummings improved the vacuum, so we had a number of mini leaks. Not ideal. You can see the bag is already better here as Douglas finished his detective work beneath Bernard's shoulder. The long sections along the sides were fine, and silent to our ears at least, but we found one in the rear corner that I just could not chase down and close, plus one in the seam joining the 2 sheets of bagging film. Okay team, I think I can see the whole team. Oh, there we are. Everyone's in shot now. That was a little bit of a treasure hunt because there were a couple of, there were more than a couple of small leaks. Some in the gussets and some on one of the seams. A couple of lessons learned. We haven't been able to get an absolutely perfect seal, but we're at the point now where it's pulling excess resin through the release film into the breather, which means that you're getting pretty damn close, and it's strongly resisting being pulled back. It's not perfect, but it's consolidating the part. So I've switched off one of the pumps. I'm leaving the forgiving pump on. That will be on all night. I've got lots of money on the meter, and then we'll come back in the morning and see how that's gone. These guys, I promised that they would get away a lot earlier than they have. I'm going to go now find something to feed them, and we're going to pack up quickly. Yeah, we laminated the part. Actually, we all piled in back to the Airbnb, having got some pizza, wine and beers from the shop 10 minutes before it closed, to add to the food that I bought for people to snack on during the day, but that in their dedication hadn't been touched. That somehow got us to 3 AM in excellent company, but the morning did bring tasks, of course. Let's go and see how it's done. Let's go. I still hear it. Checking in on Bernard and the vacuum. Poor chap, buzzing away diligently all night. Okay, the moments of truth. We can still hear the vacuum whizzing, and for those of you who are interested in energy consumption, we use less than £2 of electricity running this vacuum pump overnight. Anyway, hopefully the whole thing will still be pulled down. You can place your bets now. The odds on are an odd, aren't they? Like, let's say it's 6 to 1, it's deflated. 20 to 1, it's imploded. 50 to 1, it's been replaced with a Volkswagen Beetle. They're the chances. Still pulled down. There'd only been a little noticeable reduction in the tension in the bag. You probably can't hear me that clearly over the vacuum, but this is still... It's not as aggressive as it was when both pumps are on. If you remember, the other pump can't be run with a slight leak in the bag because it will run out of oil, then it will run dry overnight. But it's still an active vacuum. It just doesn't quite have that which you get with the other pump on at the same time, or with a perfect vacuum. Yeah. What I'm going to do before I just turn everything off is double check in the pots that the resin is cured properly, because we don't really know exactly what's happened with the temperatures overnight. Something nagging in me didn't just want to switch off and debag. I've never done a bag this large before, and so we did a few circuits, just observing in the clear natural light of day, and to be honest, wondering if that one final mini leak might be found. Alas, no. It still winds me up that the double seam join that I slaved over was the source of one of the leaks, but that was the one that we found and sealed. This, to add to all the other lessons that I've learned, is about joining vacuum bags. You're not always going to be able to have a vacuum bag big enough for your part. Apparently you can get them actually in much wider sections, but there's still always going to be a limit. Sometimes you will need to do a long seam seal to try and join two bags together to make a giant bag. And what I was trying to do was the belt and braces approach, where on one side I flash taped, on the other side I gorilla taped, because obviously gorilla tape's adhesive is almost like a gum. It's a thick rubbery kind of adhesive. I thought that would be great. I think the failure was in the flash tape side, and a few of you in the comments in the last episode commented that that's not a great idea. I probably learned that the hard way. Flash tape I normally find, because it's got a silicone adhesive, provides a really nice bond, but it was allowing, I imagine, tiny little channels in the odd little crease to allow air through, so I won't do that again. I guess you could use gum tape. I guess I was trying to do something slightly more flush, because gum tape sticks up a few millimeters. I think maybe gum tape's cheap. That's the stuff that you seal the edge of the bag with normally. I might use that instead, and maybe then do the belt and braces approach with gorilla tape, because then it just gives you a very strong join which you can't rip from side to side. Anywho, that's what I think probably if I'm making a large bag I'll do in the future. It's fairly normal where you do the gusseting around the complex contours down at the bottom. Hopefully you can hear me over the vacuum. This is a new little Sony camera we've got, because I found on some of my videos that I was getting like a mismatch of different colour profiles when I was trying to mix footage together in the edit. So particularly for the Arguably channel, that's why I've got another Sony camera, and it's got a directional microphone on it, so hopefully this is picking me up quite clearly. Yeah, so the gusseting, that's where you would normally expect to find a problem in the seal, because it's where you're doing quite intricate stuff with the gum tape. Now what we've also found, if you point it down here a little bit, thanks, along here, this is where I double sealed the join between two bags, because the mould is too large for one vacuum bag, even folded out, because we needed more than 3 meters of width. And so I had to do this join, and I did it so carefully. I sealed where it was overlapped like that. I sealed both the interfaces with flash tape on one side and with gorilla tape on the other side. And what we did discover, in fact Douglas discovered last night when we were hunting for leaks, is he went along just with his ear without having to use a stethoscope, and he heard a couple of little hisses in the flash tape. I think one about here and one about halfway along. And with a little bit of sort of kneading and pressing down, we were able to close those down, but it just means that even the seals weren't perfect. Making a bag like this is quite tricky, and I think we're pretty happy that for a bag this large, I've never done a vacuum bagging job anywhere near this large before, we got to the point of, I would say, a near perfect seal. There was one gusset that I failed to achieve down in that corner there. I was gumming and trying to re-gum, and chasing seals like that is quite difficult. And we never quite got rid of the hiss entirely, but that vacuum was hopefully able, it seems able to have pulled down enough of a negative pressure to at least get some resin being pulled through into the breather layer, which means that you are definitely getting a semi-aggressive vacuum. If this was a 100% vacuum, then we'd probably see more little spots of resin, and it would be absolutely impossible to pull this out. This is resisting being pulled. These little sort of pleats are resisting, but not as much as you'd expect on a 100% perfect vacuum, which we did not achieve. Anywho, it's not properly cured yet. It's not 100% cured, and so we are going to carry on leaving this running today, and I'll come back tomorrow and take the bag off, see what we've got. Close-up views ahoy. This is one vacuum hose, and it's the budget PVC stuff, not the slightly nicer silicone, and this version is more common for single use in vacuum infusion. Vacuum bags are of course oversized, although not overly so that you completely avoid the risk of tension in the bag, and the power of the vacuum sucks the film down hard onto the breather, making those little creases of no importance or concern. You can see its resistance to trying to pull the bag away, but in a perfect 100% vacuum it would be yet stronger. I positioned one vacuum hose at the top of the nose and the other back here at the rear. Perhaps there's some wisdom in choosing a high or low position for the through bags, but I'm not aware of any. Wisdom, that is. Explains a lot. Okay, so whilst I can't offer you wisdom, I can offer you another lesson learned, and it's about the quantity of vacuum pumps. Vacuum pumps aren't necessarily cheap. Some of the big powerful ones can be high hundreds, thousands of pounds. Mine are relatively small, but they're still relatively powerful. They are, I think, 200 and something pounds, nearly 300 pounds, and so they're not cheap. But once you have a good quality pump, as long as you look after it, it should last you years and years and years. So they are good investments, and particularly if you do an awful lot of vacuum bagging work, as we all, as good adherents of the channel should be. I do like the idea of having multiple pumps and the two different types of pump. I'm talking about the high power, 100% vacuum capable oiled pumps, which you need to check the level of, and you cannot run with a leaky bag, otherwise the oil runs down and then the whole thing breaks. And then also ones that are oil free. They offer you, I call them my forgiving pumps. If you do have a tiny little leak, it won't destroy the pump, it won't burn through lots and lots of oil because it doesn't have an oil tank, but it won't give you quite the sort of aggressive pull down that you'll get with the other one. I do like the idea of having two different types, but also just multiples. Say you put all this work into a huge wet lay job, which then needs to be vacuum bagged, or whether it's an infusion or whatever it is, and your pump dies. Fuses go, internal components break. What if you put all that time and effort into a part, and through no fault of your own, your pump just conks out on you? And so I think it's a really good idea to have one in reserve anyhow, whether it's plugged in or not, whether it's part of your system, whether it's just sat there ready to be swapped in at a moment's notice. But also, even though a relatively small pump can actually, if you have a good quality sealed bag, can actually pull down a very large part, they are deceptively powerful for their size. I do like the idea of one, not having to put in all of the effort, particularly if you have a slightly leaky bag. And so I think probably for a part the size of Bernard, which is 24, 25 square meters, having two of these, I call them small pumps, let's call them a small pump, two of them I think is probably great. Having a third maybe sat there just in case is a good plan too. It also means you can put in two vacuum exit locations, and you can strategically place those around your part. So I know it's expensive. It means that a few £100 becomes many hundreds of pounds, but I think for jobs in the future I might get myself one more, possibly another oiled pump, which will give me the potential for another perfectly sealed infusion job. If I'm going to do more and more infusion, you have to use that one. No, sorry, that's wrong. You don't have to use that one, but you must have a perfectly sealed bag. And if you have a perfectly sealed bag, you might as well use a pump that does use oil, can apply a greater pressure, and therefore doesn't need to be the forgiving pump. I hope that makes sense. Right, onward. This is sort of, but not quite, what you want to see. The negative pressure forcing unneeded resin out through the perforated film into the non-woven polyester fuzz. This improves a part's resin ratio. If you've gone way overboard with resin, it'll saturate and you can lament all of that expensive wasted epoxy. Let's take a moment to admire the glorious 1960s sports car lines of an upturned Bernard. Yes, exactly. Now the through bag connector. You should not, and in fact we didn't, need to supplement the silicone seal screw connection with gum tape. But at the time we were chasing leaks, and if there is a leak, you'll always hear the whoosh of air at this connector. It's always worth having an inline valve near the through bag, and I've O-clipped the hoses. Most people I've noticed don't bother. Might be worth taping or gumming around the clips. They're not really sharp, but imagine if you were an idiot and punctured the bag with one. This is the forgiving vacuum. You do not need to add oil to it, but it doesn't suck down as effectively as the oil-fed machine. Hopefully that overview has been helpful in good daylight, as the work on the bag with LED work lights against time pressure last episode was less clear. Let's, now the dust, or since there's no dust, the resin has settled, appraise the spraying booth. I won't claim that there was zero overspray and therefore no waste, but it's very limited, didn't get on my clothes, legs or mask, and I reckon we only lost 100 grams or so, which is less than you would with loads of rollers or brushes. The air pressure regulator, given it was a last minute cheap Amazon purchase, was perfect. It slowed the resin flow and stopped the compressor overpowering the spray gun. Now, being less than 24 hours from the end of the lamination, the resin was not cured, so I went home, waited for torrential rain, and then returned the next day to debag the part. The vacuum used about £2.50 of AC electrical juice from the yard's power block, and first I closed off the inline valves as I was intrigued how quickly the vacuum in the bag would release with the pump no longer whirring. The answer was reassuringly slowly. The vacuum was needed for those 40 hours, but it's not like the bag had gaping leaks. Through bag gizmo unscrewed and off. Now you can see the gum seal post-cure. All looks okay, and those rigid tape measures were covered in sellotape, and so escaped being resin glazed. I took the bag off. Whilst I did say before I'd love to reuse bags, this was pull down number 2. The pleats weren't perfect, and neither was the longitudinal joining seam, so I need not be too careful. I know I go on and on about this, but I really struggle with the quantity of single-use consumables in jobs like this. Domestic Alex would expand on this at the end, and I will on camera in a second too, but at this rate, using this technique and workflow, we'd go through perhaps 6 bags for a single Bernard composite part. Madness. Alright, we've got the vacuum bag off, and that obviously contains all the gum tape as well. A couple of thoughts about vacuum bags in general. I pulled this one down twice. I did a test a few weeks ago to make sure that it fitted, and then took that off, removed all the gum tape, and then obviously we used fresh gum tape this time round. Yeah, this is a few kilos of plastic waste, and I wish that you could have a way of avoiding that for each part. And I know you can get silicone multi-use vacuum bags in the industry. This is of course not silicone. I think this is PVC film. It is wasteful. It takes time to put each one together because you need to be able to cut it all to the right shape. You need to pleat, and you need to, on an exercise one like this, join 2 sheets together so it's wide enough. I'm not going to be able to revolutionise the industry in 2 minutes. I mean, at the moment we're doing the best we can just to pull down a coherent part here. So the general wisdom is that you have to run a new bag every single time you pull down a part. So I have used this bag twice, once in the test and once in this one, and I found that as long as you take it off very carefully, roll it up very carefully, keep it somewhere without any sharp bits and bobs that are going to puncture it, I couldn't see any particular reason why this couldn't be used at least twice. If I was happy with the seal down the seam, which I think I need to do differently next time round, I might have even taken this off more carefully and considered it useful for another pull down. So I reckon you can, if you handle it very deliberately. I see no particular reason why you can't get multiple uses out of large bags like this. If you're doing like a 1 meter square part, it's not very much material, fine, do another one. But yeah, I see some potential for efficiency. I do think you good people of the channel have absorbed my message on that topic. So let's get the breather off next. It was loosely laid over the part with casual overlaps and little tabs of tape to avoid shifting. Now though, of course, most sections have dots of resin cured in, lightly holding it down onto the film below. It comes off easily. There are some sections with less resin stuck in the fabric, and I'm going to save those for later reuse. For example, when you need 3 or 4 layers of breather under the through bag connector, which lessens the chance of resin disastrously getting into the connector and vacuum line. Okay, so that is bonded down, but I reckon this upper part here could be reused as well. There's only a few little specks of resin in this breather. I was initially concerned that the manually perforated red release film might affect the quality of the consolidation, or that the silicone paper might interfere with the resin and breather, but all the various parts of the hodgepodge of films between the peel ply and breather worked in perfect alliance. Most sections, even the verticals, had a fairly good amount of resin transmission through the film, and only a couple of spots we neglected to add film, which highlights why you do need it. Otherwise, too much resin flows into the absorbent breather. Where holes have been punched every couple of inches and not every few millimetres, there's a chance the part will be a little more resin rich, so heavier without benefit. That's to be avoided at scale. Let's tidy that up, and time for a jaunty camera angle of the same work that I no longer have any deeply cerebral nor reflective voiceover comments to run alongside. Now it's the perforated release film's turn. This of course is instant release by its nature, so comes off with 0 effort. But we are not done yet. Nylon peel ply is saturated with resin and lightly bonded to the carbon fibre beneath. This was applied in smaller sections for ease of application, but also ease of removal. You can see the slightest flex in the carbon as I rip the ply. This is because there's only one carbon layer which won't be that stiff, and beneath it is only more peel ply and a light release film. It's not held onto the mould. Those little white resin veins are in the peel ply, which we didn't manage to get perfectly flat, and the imperfect vacuum was not able to force flat with brute force. If you're struggling to lift up the corner or edge of peel ply to get it to peel, a very gentle wedging with the chisel does the job for a non-cosmetic part like this. And I get cross about consumables again. Find me a secondary use for all this stuff and let me know in the comment section, please. This unfortunately is totally wasted. Outside it was delightful, and the reason why I was impatient to get a tent-bound lamination job done in late summer or early autumn. The weather's really arrived, it's blowing around like a mad thing, and I can barely hear myself over the rain. What a charming corner of the planet this is, and a warning that I'll need to get some insulation on some of the tubing to stop condensation drips. But not this. This is rain, but limited to the edge rails. Bernard's mould is safe from all that, thankfully, but humidity and condensation does need to be thought through as winter arrives. First, I want to show you in a sequence of awfully panned camera movements the carbon fibre part. 1 ply thick only. The cure has been perfect. Thank you, Gurit. All the consumables worked a dream. Thank you, East Coast Fiberglass Supplies. but we only managed one structural ply, not the more than half a dozen that we really needed. Thought needs to be put in, and executive decision making. After I checked that the curves are being nicely conformed to, and after wrapping Bernard's mould up, safe from drips, dust or other nonsense. Bernard does now have a cover. In fact, it's a car cover for an extra large SUV. This is because whilst Bernard isn't that tall, as this is only the lower shell, but he's 5 metres long and 2 metres wide, so a normal cover would come up short. I managed to put it on back to front, hence why the wing mirror pockets are towards the rear end, not the nose, but it'll do for now. Before real Alex signs off and drives off into the wet, murky English countryside, domestic Alex must share thoughts, conclusions, and more importantly, that executive decision. Right, so we're now going to do the actual debrief and the decision about what we are going to do next. There was plenty of debate, really constructive stuff in the comments over the last few months when I was talking about different styles of layup, different ways of getting resin into my fabric to make my part. Some people were super keen on straightforward wet lay, just keep it, straightforward and old-fashioned and simple. Some people were saying you've got to resin infuse, it'd be madness not to do anything else. People were saying do pre-preg. Everyone had an idea. None of them were daft. But at some point, I simply have to make a decision. And that's what occasionally people in the comments don't fully understand. At some point, I've got to make a call, and it's not going to keep everyone happy. It's always done in the best possible spirit, but I simply can't adhere to everything that I've been told to do. And I settled on this sort of midway system of an efficient resin sprayed application of wet laid resin. And then the idea, of course, was to vacuum back to try and get best of both worlds, and the hope was to be able to do it in 3 stages. The first to put down the inner skin of the shell, and then do the foam core once that had cured, and then in a second lamination, second of the proper laminations, put the outer shell on. That was going to be the idea, trying to balance up the amount of working time I will have with the extra slow hardener for the resin, a reasonable working day length for volunteers and for me, and trying to minimize the number of stages because I wanted to have as much chemical cure between plies as possible, not relying necessarily on the epoxy resin, just doing a mechanical adhesive cure. So that was the idea, and I did my estimates of how many hours each ply would take, and it just turned out to be wrong. Obviously, volunteers and us working as a team will get slicker as time goes on. We were slower at the beginning than we were at the end, but it's not by a factor of 2 or 3, which is how much faster it would have needed to be. The truth is, there are simply quite a number of plies in each of the skins. There's multiple layers of carbon fibre of different types, twill, unidirectional, there's 2 layers of dial-in, there's going to be Vectran in the nose. This is a reasonably complicated recipe for the layup. And I think what I've now realised, having done that one lamination where we achieved one proper layer of carbon only, and then all the rest of it was peel ply and then breather and release film and stuff, I think I've just realised that it's unrealistic with the setup that I have and the facilities I have to do this with the 3-part plan: skin, foam, skin. What I don't want to do is simply say, okay, right, we now know how many skins we can do in a day. Let's say 2, maybe 3 if we really push it. Right, we're going to spend 2 or 3 whole lamination jobs doing the inner skin. Then we'll do the foam, and then we'll do 2 or 3 more lamination jobs for the outer. That's going to go through you have to vacuum bag it every single time. Apart from all the consumables, that's a huge amount of work. Right, so once Bernards are once I'm happy with this layup, once I'm happy with the shell, this is obviously going to be the first shell, the prototype, the test. Once we're producing the second in a pair of Bernards and then possibly a second Bernard vehicle and a third, I want to do something more efficient, faster, and it was always probably going to end up being resin infusion in the future, even if I was to outsource that to a company with the facilities, once we've shown proof of concepts and so on. I think we might need to shift to that for this job. Otherwise, I think I risk wasting a huge amount of resin and a huge amount of consumables and a huge amount of expensive carbon fibre. I think we're going to shift to resin infusion. Quite a big change. What am I going to do with the shell that we've made? I was thinking about that. I mean, do we just take it off and throw it away? I don't think so. I was always intending to upgrade the mold. The mold is currently hundreds of kilograms of steel and MDF and polypropylene and thousands of screws and all that. You can't move it around. It's on legs. What I've always wanted to do is make another mold from it, which can then go on wheels. It can be lighter weight, and it would be sort of the long-term mold, and then I can just dismantle the original. I think I might turn this carbon fiber skin into the new mold. I'm going to build up extra layers of carbon on the outside, and I am going to use carbon and epoxy resin, which I know sounds crazy for a mold, but actually if you think about it, you'd end up using less materials, less fabric and less resin than you would to get an equally stiff part made of traditional mold making materials like chopped strand mat, fiberglass. And I have access to very, very affordable carbon fiber. So I think that might be the best thing to do. It's going to go on the outside, of course, of the main mold. So it means that the new mold is going to be another male mold, and it's going to be therefore about 3 or 4 millimeters bigger than the original. But we can deal with that. It will be dimensionally proportionate to the original mold, but just that little bit bigger because it's sitting on the outside. So that's what I'll do. I think I've probably only got a few weeks left of being able to do any laminations in that tent this season anyhow, because the winter's going to really set in soon, and I need to be able to have at least some temperature and limited humidity in there in order to make that work. So I'm going to now expedite that. I'm going to make the mold. There's going to be a proper flange on the bottom that comes out flat, as opposed to having the gum tape having to go on the vertical, which is going to make life a lot easier. I'm going to fit a structure inside which will be lightweight, but it will have wheels so we can move it around on like big off-road casters. We could even pop it on a trailer. I think this is going to be a really, really good plan. And then we will be able to, I think it's probably going to be in the early spring when conditions are better, we can then lay up all the dry fabric for the entire Bernard shell with all the foam in the middle, everything laid up, at leisure. I say at leisure, it's great fun anyway, but without a time pressure. I can then consult professionals about getting a really good resin infusion schedule, and that means basically where you put all the hoses and lines and through bag connectors and spirals, and it's quite a complex layout. I'll do a couple of tests to work out the speed at which the resin will move through my thickness of ply over the winter. I can do that in the workshop so that we can plan how long the infusion will take, and therefore that will help the schedulers. And then we'll do it, hopefully, to then get the best resin to fabric ratio possible. Infusion is the best way of doing this. It's simply the most advanced way of getting the strongest part. And it's going to be less wasteful in terms of resin because you only use exactly what you need. And hopefully the part will infuse in less than an hour, as long as we design it well. And that's what we're going to do. It's a change. It was always on the list, and it was always going to be the eventual plan to do resin infusion, but it wasn't going to be necessarily for this prototype. Hopefully you'll agree with my decision making on this and deciding to do a bit of a left turn. If you don't, let me know why. That's all good, and I will update you with news. I've got to be in Ireland for a few days now because I've got speaking work, but then I'll be back, and I promise I will do the lamination of those extra carbon layers. We'll have it in a nice big bright colour so that the mould will look smart and homogeneous. It will look much more the part than it did before, and I will update you. Cool. I think that's probably it. Right, back to me in the tent. Never mind. If you can hear me over the rain, bye.